Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I am your host for today's episode, Nikki Ivy with Sweetfish Media. Guys, I've got with me today Christine Bottagaro, who is CMO at Kapost. Christine, how you doing today?
I'm well. Hey, Nikki.
Hey, Christine. We're going to have some fun today, and I'm going to learn. I got my student cap on today because Christine's going to be talking to us about how to close the gap between strategy and execution, which I think is applicable no matter what discipline or industry you are in. As a parent, I'm trying to figure out how to close the gap between strategy and execution, as a wife, all of that. But we're going to be talking about it in terms of B2B marketing and sales today. But before we get to all of that, Christine, I would love it if you would just give us a little bit of background on yourself and what you and the folks at Kapost have been up to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kapost is a content marketing platform. That's the way the analysts talk about it. But we are a SaaS-based platform that basically just creates seamless customer experiences through great content. So from planning to creating to distributing and measuring, we manage the content workflow and all of the materials and messaging and things that have to go into that, all of the pieces, parts, and the measurement of it. So it's something that as a marketer, I wish I had had probably 20 years ago. My life would have been a whole lot easier. But now that I'm in it, it's really cool because I get to market to marketers and talk. And now we're talking about marketing. So it's like the trifecta.
It's way meta.
It's way meta. Exactly. So I've spent years in the app dev world selling into application development houses as well as IT. And so now marketing to marketers is a whole different level, a higher bar for sure. So I'm excited about it. And just to be clear, we were acquired at the end of May by Upland Software. So now we are Upland Kapost and part of a larger family with sister products that help on customer advocacy management and RFQ generation. So we got new tools and things to play with as a marketer, which is always fun.
That is exciting. Yeah, who doesn't want a seamless customer experience?
I do. Yeah, yes, please.
That was my impression of Samantha from Sex and the City. And now I've just dated myself. Don't care. Watch it all first run. Hashtag 80s baby. Anyway.
Live your truth.
I will not be shamed. So we're going to be getting into this subject of how to close that gap between strategy and execution. Real quick, just to give us an overview, talk to us about what that gap looks like.
Yeah, so I think it's something that you don't see right away. The gap is over time when you start straying a bit from what you want to have happen into what actually happens. And the reality of life is where that gap typically occurs,
sure.
Is when people come in and like, oh, I need this and it's next week and then I need that. It may not be part of your plan, so you have to accommodate that. But then sometimes that will snowball. I need more of those, or now I need it localized, or I need it for this other group. So whatever that is tends to then dominate your life and your work. So how do you then stay true to what you really want to have happen and deliver on that so that you're not at quarter end or year end looking back and saying, we didn't get to all those really cool, innovative ideas we wanted to get to because we got caught up in the daily. So how to manage that, that's really where the gap occurs. And I think it can also be where you have an aspiration in the plan that maybe isn't realistic. So it's sort of a nice check too to say, hey, maybe we were too lofty. That's too much to take on in this time frame. And that's maybe where you could insert a little bit more of agile marketing that's inspect and adapt and kind of checking in with the strategy. But typically that's where we see things fall apart is at execution. And it's something I say, unfortunately, Nikki, to my team a lot is like, your execution will kill your strategy every time. Like execution is going to win on that. So are you purposeful? Is it what you want to have happen?
Right. Yeah. No, I think all of us can think of times in our personal and business lives where the execution absolutely killed the strategy, but we get excited about the strategy, right? You were mentioning how the strategy is the fun part. Talk about that for us a little bit.
Yeah. So in fact, it's funny you say that because Nikki, we've got next week a marketing summit or marketing madness, whichever way it turns out, but we get everybody from the team in one place and we kind of sequester ourselves and there's big Post-it notes and stickies all over and very agile facilitation. And we dream up really cool things. Our go-to-market, how should our message change? Who are we talking to? What do they care about? What are the ways we want to put together the plan, go forward. And then we walk out of that, we're energized. We've got other people involved in it. And then it gets to execution. And you find that the day-to-day starts chipping away at those lofty plans. And they get sort of on the back burner. And we start lowering the heat on those and doing different things. So that's the exciting part, because that's where you can really invite innovation. Everyone's got a voice in that. We have our interns in there and they have crazy good ideas, and the sales comes in and customer success, and you're like, oh, that's great, we should do that as well. And then it's all baked into this amazing plan, and you socialize it and you share it. And then how are you doing against that even 1 month in, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we all go to these conferences, or a lot of us do, and you get all energized. You saw a keynote and they're like, think differently or do all these cool things. And then you get back and you're mired in email, and then you're in this meeting and that. And so what happens to all of that? Like, how do you really bring it to reality?
Well, you gave a good answer. We talked about this offline, and one of the key things that you mentioned that I wrote down here that really stuck out was to execute in service of your strategy. I think I know what that means, right? And I think that's the gap as well. It's like those two things stop being connected at a certain point, right? And that probably at the point at which it stops being fun. And then you have to start doing like the hard part of the execution. And then you're executing in service of, keeping your job or justifying your salary, frankly, or, just getting this off your plate and not necessarily executing in service of your strategy. So tell us what execution in service of strategy looks like.
Yep, absolutely. And let me back up, Nikki, because I had forgotten I said that, so thank you. But it's a good check against your strategy. Like if you're, hey, we're going to go land on the moon next quarter. Really? How is that serve the business? So you have to really make sure that your strategy is also aligned with where you need to go in the business and blah, blah, blah. Like we can get carried away as marketers, which is the fun part. So when you do those check-ins with execution, you also want to make sure that you have other people's buy-in, because nobody does this in a vacuum. So are they part of that? Are you mapping those outcomes, what you want to have happen, to things that matter to other people as well? And what is their role in that? So then kind of going back to the strategy and keeping it maybe even visible. You do have something on the wall that reminds you of the 5 key things that you're working towards. And you may find midway that the way you're doing it, the execution is different than when you envision, but it's still in service of that strategy. So is it present? Is it there? Is it checked against in all of the things that you're doing? Do you have a way to do that, right? And it could be Excel, it could be whatever you choose, it could be Kapost, whatever. But the way to kind of say, this is how we're keeping our strategy front and center, because we've all agreed on it. And now it would be very easy to lose sight. So it's that check against. And then again, looking at the strategy and the plan and saying, you know what? At the beginning of the year, before this acquisition, we thought that's what we wanted to do. Now we may change our strategy. And you know what? That's okay. I think we tend to think that it's baked in, like the batter's done, don't mess with it. And it's like, well, let's test it. It's not delicious anymore. Maybe we need to change it. So that's okay. just because you spent all that time doesn't mean it's 100% right throughout the year. So revisit it, update it. Hopefully you're not changing it dramatically, but you may have to. A lot of things change in the business.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think that that's an important distinction you make there between the strategy, which is like this overall goal / shared vision and ultimate thing that we're looking to achieve, and the plan. I think the plan, like you're talking about, does have to be flexible. I mean, I think if you're too rigid with this idea of executing in service of your strategy, if you're too rigid there, then you end up, executing bad ideas even after you realize that they weren't the best ideas. And so, so I'm glad that you made that distinction. And you talked about before making sure that we socialize and share when it comes to this strategy and this plan, because as we all know, that is super important, both within a marketing team and between the marketing team and the rest of the revenue growth team, right, including sales. And so talk a little bit about how the plan / strategy evolves once we start looking at it as an entire revenue growth team.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, we use share a lot, and I think it's a really powerful word and it's important to do. But the piece that sometimes we're missing in that is the collaboration. So I can share my plan and that's great. And people are probably going to head nod like, yep, that makes sense. I like it. But have we truly collaborated at the atomic level? Have we gone back to early days of developing that strategy and plan and saying, are we in line here? Are we aligned? And here are the things we're going to start doing. How does that impact your team? What would you rather have happen? How do we work through this? So that happens before sharing, because sharing feels very passive, right? I'm telling you, Nikki, about my team, and you're like, yeah, or excuse me, my plan. You're like, yeah, that sounds great. But have I really engaged you? Have I enrolled you in that process? And the answer is probably no. So how do you do that throughout the whole thing? And that's check-ins, that's, making sure that the right people, their voices are there, because then all of a sudden they're bought in, and they're bought in and at a level that is much more than just a head nod. So that really helps in terms of the rollout and the revisit to say, hey, remember Susie, when we met on this early days, this sounded like the right way. Tell me why your team is not working with us on this now, because I want to understand that. So You can kind of hold people accountable. But again, remember, they're invested because their outcomes are based on your success. So how do you bring that in early days? That's the critical part. It's not like, hey, y'all, here's our plan. It's amazing, right? And everyone's like, yeah, it is. That's great. It's before then.
Yeah. And it's like you mentioned as well, one of the ways to do that, right? To make sure to bake in, as you say, into this plan pie, into this delicious plan pie, is to make sure that the outcomes that are being measured are aligned as well. And you made no bones about it that you said, we're not playing this MQL game. and that, listen, if we're really going to be aligned, then we have to be aligned on those KPIs.
Yep.
And how we're being measured. So talk a little bit about that for us.
Yep, absolutely. So I will tell you that it has made my life hard. I've made my own life difficult. But at one point, and I tell you, Nikki, there was an experience I had with a company we acquired. And I was like, oh, this is great. There's a lot of health in the pipeline. And when I really dug into it, I realized there wasn't. It was a lot of padding in the database and things. And I realized that even though the numbers showed up good on charts, they weren't viable. So if you only look at MQLs, that's not enough. And I said, you know what? I don't want to be that person. I want to be that marketer. So I said, marketing, our whole team, our function needs to be closer to revenue. So I said, I will take a coverage number for opportunity dollars create and revenue create by marketing. Now, trust me when I say that made my life hard. And it became very real. So in every pipeline and every forecast meeting, marketing KPIs are up on the screen because we're top of the funnel and we're doing things that are, indicative of how the sales pipe is going to roll. So it became real. And our team, every team meeting, those were the first things we started with. So having that discipline, having that understanding takes out some of the things that people can use to justify things that don't perform. So MQLs are a way to get there. Absolutely. Like, I understand that. But the reality is, are we delivering true value to the business? And that is in revenue generation. So that's when it became real. And that's when all the plans mapped to that. And that's when, honestly, I got the respect of finance and of sales and of everybody else in the company, because marketing became real and not just the make things look nice group. So that's our credibility. That is our right to sit at the table, because we are right there. And, being involved in valuation conversations around, in the road shows, we were able to put up a really strong story that the marketing engine is viable and here's what we're doing. And so valuations became more attractive because of that. It's not just sales.
Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. And what you hit on is something that I was speaking with a gentleman, Kylan Lundeen, and he mentioned the same thing you're talking about, right? Is having a number, giving marketing a number. He said that when salespeople come in, he tells them that they can count on something like whatever the number was, like 2 deals a month directly sourced from marketing. So he was giving them like a hard number of people on his marketing team, like, you guys must produce X amount of new opportunities for the sales team in this time frame. And I just think, that's incredible. I can see how it would make your lives harder, but I also see how it plays into this shared goal idea and this achieving this alignment that everybody is pushing for these days. So yeah, you're onto something.
We'll see. We'll see how it plays out, Nikki.
So now, Christine, that I've successfully picked your brain and seen what I could get out of it, it's time for you to tell us what you're putting in it. So tell us about a learning resource that you have engaged with here recently that is either informing your approach or that's just got you excited these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 things. One is, as I mentioned, because I get to sell to marketers, we have people who inform me every day as our customer base. So we have a leadership council, and I learn from these friends every day about what they're faced with, because every organization is different the way they're structured. So anytime I get to talk to a customer, I am that much smarter. The other piece is I am super, super crazy for I come out of the Challenger sale, which I'm still passionate about, but CEB was acquired by Gartner. And CEB, Brett Adamson, is all about buyer enablement. And that is, I almost hesitate to say those words because I'll get an eye roll from people on my team, but it's how do we make it easier for people to buy from us? And that has been my watchword. So I am consuming everything around that. We go out as marketers and we're like, hey, here's our cool stuff. Don't you want some? Instead of finding the jobs to be done on the buy side, what questions are being asked, help them understand more so they know when not to buy from us and when to buy from us, right? Like, we're not everything for everybody. So how do we help them? So that's where I'm really engaged. And I think I probably read 8 pieces in the past 2 days that are put out by the Gartner machine around buyer enablement and that landscape and toolkits and how do you rev a website to do that? How do you serve them? Buying guides. Like, I'm all about that because it's super actionable. Right. It's
I love
not
it.
theoretical.
That sounds like a fun rabbit hole, the buyer enablement rabbit hole.
Yes.
Like, who doesn't want to create a frictionless buying experience? Listen, as a salesperson, what we run into is basically the coaching around that a lot of the time. And listen, no shade to anybody that I sold alongside or who coached me. But a lot of it is like how to avoid those conversations around what friction the buyer is up against when it comes to that, or how to overcome that friction as an objection versus how to remove that friction. And the case might just be that it's not a sales function to remove that friction in the larger sense.
Yep.
But I feel you. That, yes, that's a thing that needs to be. I think that's like the next frontier, right? So as all these disciplines, all of us are sort of rebranding or redefining our identities, right? As who we are as marketers, who we are as salespeople, and customer centric becomes this buzzy thing. I think the way to bring it beyond just being buzzy and into action, into practice, is to really start looking at how to remove friction from the buyer experience, like straight up. So thank you for that's the thing I'm looking for when I ask that question.
There you go.
So thank you so much for that. And I know, Christine, that just like me, folks listening have become fast fans of yours, and they're going to want to know how to keep up with you. So tell us how folks can connect with you.
Well, I appreciate that. So I think LinkedIn is the best. I'm not the best self-marketer, but I do post a bit on LinkedIn, and it's Christine Bottagaro. You just have to find me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to connect, or any conversations. I welcome it. The more I can learn, the better I am.
Yeah, yes, follow her. Her content is fire. I say, I speak firsthand experience. Thank you so much. There's a million other questions I'd love to ask you, just based on your experience and how much, frankly, fun you are to talk to. So we'll have to have you on again. But for now, we'll close this out. Thank you so much for being on the show, Christine.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Nikki.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.